Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. I am your host, Redbeard, and it is a pleasure to be able to be back for another episode this evening. Tonight, we are going to be covering the People, Arms, and Militia, and goodness gracious, there's flying around. And we are going to be exploring some of the themes of the Second Amendment, the first law of nature, how the people, the arms, and the militia all kind of meld together, and kind of some of the words from our founders as they kind of saw how this all was supposed to come to fruition, and ultimately their thoughts and their perspectives on all of these different subjects. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and check out the podcast and the episode. And it should be a good one, as with the previous two that I did, the Entangling Alliances and the Drafts, Conscription, and Selective Service. This is going to be a little bit more detailed, so I do have some notes that I'll be referencing from time to time, so I hope you really enjoy the show. So let's get into it. This is the theme of, the people, arms, and militia. And I feel like it's something that, yes, well, it has been beat, to death, per se. I feel like it's good to always get some type of reminder or refresher and really kind of expand our understanding of what this was all intended to be. So we're going to start off with this first, a couple things from some very smart people that came well beyond our time. But let's go ahead. The right to self-defense predates America, predates written law, and it also predates civilization. It is what Justice Blackstone called the primary law of nature. If a man has no right to defend his life, his family, and his liberty, then he has no rights at all. Furthermore, we have a quote by Thomas Jefferson that goes, plainly, in his draft of Virginia's Constitution, no free man shall be debarred the use of arms. Now, one thing that you're going to notice is that there is a trend of how they say things and how they specifically explain a lot of their viewpoints and some of the words that they use. Wording was very important to these gentlemen and to their wives and to all of the people that were involved into this idea of rebellion and revolution to get something better. They were very specific for a reason. George Mason also warned to disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them, essentially saying that, like, if you have no way to fight back, then it just makes it that much easier. It makes it easier to enforce your will upon people, upon the population, and be able to get them to much quicker to submit to whatever it is that you're trying to do. Why does this all matter? Okay, the Second Amendment is not about deer hunting. It's not about sport. Okay, it's not about hobbies, but rather it is about survival and sovereignty. It's about the ability of the individual to properly defend themselves from all threats, not just for whimsical fun, not just for things that they do or like to do as hobbies, but it was a very serious thing for our founders. Additionally, the founders lived in a world where governments grew corrupt. Okay. Armies turned against the citizens and kings enslaved their subjects. Additionally, they knew liberty without arms, at least in their mind, perhaps was a lie or very much an impossibility. One must be able to defend these things in order to maintain them and keep them alive. So let's provide some framing here, okay? If the government can decide when, how, and if you may defend yourself, are you free or are you merely on a short leash? Okay. This is a framing question that we're hopefully going to be able to explain and additionally be able to work through as we go through the subject of this evening. It's not only going to be the only question that hopefully I can answer, but hopefully we can broaden the horizon on the information that you may or may not know. Now, let's get into it. The first segment I'd like to touch on, which we kind of talked about just slightly in the intro, was the first law of nature, which is self-defense. John Locke pretty much put it this way in a very well said manner. Man has a natural right of self-preservation, and arms are the practical means of securing it, which means that it is within our right to defend ourselves. We are designated this right by nature, or as I see it in my case, as a Christian, by God, who creates nature. So it is a realm of succession down to man, and it's not something that is really within the auspice or the responsibility of government to be able to dictate. And we'll get a little bit more into that. But look, we reserve this right, and this right is solely to us. In addition, William Blackstone, self-defense is justly called the primary law of nature, so it cannot be taken away by the law of society. It is not to the law of society. And when we go and we explore more of these concepts, there should be a reasonable explanation as to why it was looked at this way. Okay. Jefferson also warned against laws forbidding arms. Such laws disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Essentially saying that, look, the average person, the average decent human being is not going to go out of their way to commit crimes, especially when it comes to the implementation of defense that they choose to use. Okay. They very much implied the fact that, look, like bad people are going to do bad things, and it should not be blaming the people who are otherwise peaceable or have no intentions of going forth and doing any harm to somebody. It's not right to deprive these people of their ability to defend themselves from those of whom would seek to hurt them. Okay. History proves them right. In every society where people were disarmed, crime rose naturally and tyranny grows. Okay. These are two things that we can look at invariably. And when you look at the disarmament campaigns and you look at the growth of tyranny, you look at the growth of government, you look at the rise in crime, it's often muddled by people who use various excuses as to, oh, it's not rising, or this isn't the case, or you're actually safer, or you're more free to be able to go and live your life. And the reality of it is you create a situation in which it becomes a very tumultuous hurricane of consequence. And we will start to see more and more of that as we go through. A key point here that I would like to kind of emphasize and point out is arms are not about violence necessarily, right? They are about deterrence, independence, and the guarantee of liberty. Now, one might say that arms may be utilized in a form of violence that would be defensive in nature, but I think you get the general concept of how this is starting to shape up. We're going to move into the second segment here to further hammer home some of the points here and extrapolate or expand on some other points that I feel are very important to keep in mind. The individual right and the militia. Critics try to claim that the Second Amendment only protects militias, not individuals. But the founders, they erased that false divide, really. They did everything that they could in their explanation to be able to assert the fact that, look, it is not simply just the militia. It is the individual who also reserves the right to be able to adequately defend themselves. Something that was a maxim not only for our founders, but for many people over many generations and many millennia that fundamentally understood the preservation of rights, the preservation of self, and the preservation of property. George Mason simply asks, who are the militia? Okay. They consist now of the whole people except a few public officers. So if we examine the militia, and we'll get obviously a little bit more into this, the militia is of the people, okay, of the whole people, as a matter of fact. The whole people are the militia, for the exception of a few public officers. This was very explicit. This was something that they fundamentally understood. Madison of Federalist 42, security of liberty rests on a militia amounting to near 500,000 citizens with arms in their hands. At the time, this was how he figured it. This is what he saw. And I would say that it still holds a lot of weight today. I mean, when you look at the size of the military that we have today, I mean, Yeah, it's bigger, but at the same time, when you look at the way that they even thought back then, they were still going to a 500,000. Okay. And it wasn't a standing army, it wasn't a state ordained army. They spoke of the militia. Okay. And I think that's a very interesting and proper point to make, because this is a theme, again, that they tend to carry through each and every conversation that surrounds the militia, arms, and the people. The militia was not, here it is, the militia was not a government controlled force. It was the body of the people themselves. Okay, so again, once again, we are reasserting the fact that the militia was of the whole body of the people themselves. It was not a government force. It was not a force meant to come under the auspice and regulation of government mandates and will and all of that. It was meant to be a force consisting of the whole body of the people. Again, just one more assertion of where the founders looked at based off of their experiences and their ultimate conclusions, and comparing these things as well to things like the first law of nature through extensive examination of history and so on. A key point coming from this, of course, is protecting the militia means protecting the individual right to arms, because the people are the militia. Once again, driving home the point that the people are the militia. Okay, this was a evident portion of what the founders understood. So now we get into the realm of well-regulated. What does this mean? What does well-regulated mean? Today, politicians tell us and twist well-regulated to mean heavily restricted. It's a distortion overwhelmingly as to what well-regulated was implying, and ultimately what it was meant to be, which was, as we go in here, in the 18th century usage, which is exactly how everything was framed, was using the language of the time and using the legal definitions, which is something that people should understand, is when they wrote the Constitution, when they had these debates, they used legal definitions, okay? Legal standing definitions. Well-regulated meant well-trained, effective, and functioning properly. Let us provide a slight example here, okay? For example, a well-regulated clock was one that kept accurate time, right? Not one. It was not one that was burdened with heavy restrictions. It didn't tick the wrong way. It didn't stutter. It didn't stop. It was a perfectly well-oiled machine. There was no problems. It was well-regulated, well-maintained, well-kept. That's what well-regulated means. It does not mean the ability to go forth to regulate or restrict the use of arms for the common person, but rather it was really more of like this position of, hey, like, we want you to be well-regulated. We want you to be well-trained, capable, well-maintained, well-kept, and ready for anything. Again, reinforcing this idea that if the whole body of the people are the militia, then there was an expectation that each person should also be able to defend themselves as an individual. Okay, it's not just well-regulated on part of the militia, it's well-regulated on part of the average person as well. And I truly believe that this was fundamentally exactly what they meant. Okay, they codified it, they wrote it down, and they used specific language explaining what it is their intent was, smashing this idea that we have a living constitution. There is no reason that they knew of, that they explained of, that they even implied that the Constitution would need any form of interpretation. It was never created as a living document, but rather a document that was full in its intent. It said what it said. And when you break down the words and you break down the meanings of those words, they explain it for themselves. Words like shall are a very powerful legal term that implies that you shall not do this. It's not, we don't think you can do this. It's not, well, maybe you couldn't do this or you shouldn't do this. It was, you shall not do this. It was very strong legal phrasing. Moving on. Applied to militia, citizens were expected to be trained, disciplined, and prepared, not disarmed. Again, reinforcing the idea of well-regulated as it pertains to the individual, but also to the militia. Very, very important things. There was an expectation that the average person was to be well regulated, well maintained, in proper working order, and the ability to be prepared at any given time, never to be disarmed. Moving on, there's an excerpt by the 10th Amendment Center analysis, which the militia, the founders envisioned was effective because it was independent of government control, not because it was shackled by it. When we examine this, it's yet another portion to where we see that the militia was always supposed to be independent of government control. Always supposed to be independent of government control. Never shackled by it, never mandated by it, never regulated by it, but only brought together whensoever the need arose in order to provide a common defense, to repel invasions, and to put down insurrections. And furthermore, not just of foreign threats, but also from threats within. The militia was very unique. There's a reason that the founders fundamentally understood why a militia was important and an armed people were important versus having standing militaries. This was a clearly defined thing. They explained it to the maximum as to why they thought this way and to why they say that history shows us that this is the most effectual way of preserving liberty and quelling tyranny. A key point here is the phrase well-regulated strengthens the people's right. It never diminishes it. So if we examine well-regulated once more before moving on, it really does strengthen our right. It does not diminish it. And the reason that it's said this way is because there is an expectation that people ought to be well-armed, well-provisioned, well-prepared, and well-maintained. If we can do this on our own, in communities, in our groups, then we have the greatest ability to be able to defend not only our liberty, our communities, our states, but ultimately our country in the most effective and decisive way possible. Now, moving on to the fourth segment of the show here tonight, the militia as a check on tyranny. Okay, the founders feared standing armies, but trusted the people. Patrick Henry has a quote here that says, "The great object is that every man be armed. Everyone who is able may have a gun." So what does able mean? Okay, if we go back to well-regulated, okay, it's not the idea of a law. It's not the idea of anything like that. It's the idea that, look, if you can stand on your own 2 feet and you're capable and you can walk around and you can function and you can be a human being, it was the idea that if you were capable, that you were also capable of having a firearm and being part of that common defense, being a individual who can express or promote their own defense, right? So this was a big thing. George Mason, a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people, trained to arms in the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. Again, it comes right back down to this notion that they talk about, which is the people, and the people consisting in creating and composing the militia, and the militia being well-trained, okay? Well-trained to arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. This was heavily implied and talked about time and time and time and again. You can tell by these quotes that this is something they hammered home all the time. Going back to Madison, America's unique advantage was that her citizens were armed, unlike subjects of Europe. They fundamentally understood this. They understood that we have a unique advantage, that the people of our nation, our country, were armed. The people of the many states had the ability to be armed, to promote a individual, but also a common defense, whether it's by themselves in their own property, in their own affairs, or as the militia, as it is said numerous times by the founders. The whole body of the people is the militia. Now we're going to go on again to something that the 10th Amendment Center has talked about, which is militias were designed as a structural safeguard, okay? Not theory, but a working barrier to tyranny. And I believe that this is true. I believe that this is echoed not only through what the 10th Amendment Center has come to a conclusion on, but they fundamentally also know that this was the intention of the founding fathers. And as we've gone through and as we've seen, you can tell by the way that they worded things, they phrased things through their many arguments and their discussions, that this was the core component of what a right for the people to keep and bear arms and the militia was intended to be. History also confirms this, okay? Lexington and Concord, 1775, it wasn't a professional army that stood up to the redcoats. It was farmers, blacksmiths, and townsmen, people that were prepared, people that were capable, people that were able-bodied and had the ability to take up arms to repel this attack, okay? Those men were, in all intents and purposes, and by fact, the militia, armed with the same arms as soldiers defending their liberty. A key takeaway here, tyranny fears an armed citizenry. That is why disarmament is always one of the first primary steps of any tyranny, any overreaching or authoritarian government anywhere. In the fifth segment, I want to cover the no limitations on the people's arms and what does this include? The founders placed no restrictions on the types of arms the people may keep. As a matter of fact, Tench Coxe goes on in 1789, writing in support of Madison's proposed Bill of Rights, the militia of these free commonwealths, entitled and accustomed to their arms, possess individually the same implements of war, their swords, and every other terrible implement of the soldier are the birthright of an American. Okay, think about that for a minute. I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread this so it's heard one more time by Tench Coxe. The militia of these free commonwealths, entitled and accustomed to their arms, possess individually the same implements of war, their swords, and every other terrible implement of the soldier are the birthright of an American. They did not stutter. They did not stumble over their words. They didn't just think about this. It is the birthright of every American to have the exact same implements and arms of the soldier. There was no of this time. There was no it only up to this point. There was no time frame at all. It was cut and dry. They meant every single thing that they said. There's no interpretation. There's no guesswork. This is fundamentally what they said. In other words, the people were meant, as I just reiterated, were meant to be as a well-armed as the soldiers, because the people were the soldiers. They were the militia, right? We've gone through this. We went through this previously. We are the militia, okay? The whole body of the people is the militia, barring a few public officers. Simple as that. Thus, we, the people, the militia, have the birthright to the very same arms and armaments and implements of the soldier, because we are the soldiers. They were cut and dry. This was reiterated time and time and time and again. Mason goes on, arms were the safe defense of a free state. They fundamentally understood that the arms of the people, the arms of the militia, were the sure defense of a free state. It gave this free state the ability to properly defend itself, notwithstanding the individuals within it and their ability to defend themselves at an individual level. A key point on this, the balance of power requires equality of arms. Disarming the people while arming the state in tanks, drones, and rifles flips liberty into servitude. You following what I'm saying here so far? It inverts this. And as you see, anytime that you have an inversion like this, there is usurpation. there is forced servitude, and there is subjugation. They were pretty cut and dry. They understood what they were saying. They did not stumble. They did not guess. This is what they understood from history, from their history. They took the lessons of old and they applied them to the new republic of the United States. They fundamentally understood that this is what helped as a bulwark to keep the people liberty-oriented, free of oppression, and able to promote the greatest, most well-designed defense that you can have. Moving on, we're going to look at modern erosion and government inversion. The founders envisioned armed people and limited government. This was fundamental and fairly well echoed throughout most, if not the entirety, of their discussions and the founding documents we have, and even documents that helped build up and compose the founding documents. Today, we see disarmed citizens, militarized government. We are seeing the inversion of this. We are seeing this separation where the average person, the citizen, no longer is able to easily access the same equal firearms or implementations as we were intended to. But instead, we're seeing this oppressive state that is growing up and not stopping on its growth. And it's becoming this empire, waging wars all over the world, but also bringing those implements of war to bear down on the American people. With the American people diminished in their ability to be able to adequately gain access to these firearms. I think it speaks for itself. And the founders fundamentally understood the dangers that came with this. We have examples, SWAT raids and armored vehicles in American neighborhoods. We are seeing an unprecedented amount of this. We look at these types of situations and we see the up-armoring, we see the increased arsenal of the local, state, and city law enforcement. We also see this in the federal law enforcement apparatus and the ability to just, at will, it seems, to just bring forth a warrant. And we know how the warrant system works now. It's completely broken and they can just bring it forth out of thin air. And to be able to utilize equipment that we should have for our own defense, but they decide we shouldn't have, which in and of itself creates a schism in the power structure. Expanding gun control efforts while the state arms itself to the teeth. Again, emphasizing the fact that the state wants this power, the state wants to increase its arms, the state wants to have this power schism or this power over the people in order to assert its dominance. This is why the state also fears an armed populace, because that armed populace at any time could fight back. And it wouldn't be a fair fight. It wouldn't be a fight that's in their advantage, which is exactly the way the founders understood it. It should never be in the state's advantage because they understood the dangers of an ever-growing tyrannical state. We also have a situation where courts recognizing individuals' rights, Heller, McDonald, and Bruin, but political culture pushing restrictions. So they're also emphasizing as well, or we're also emphasizing as well, that this is not so much just a political issue. This is a societal issue. And we have to try and look at these at the same time and figure out how it is that we can move and we can create a better structure for society and be able to bring people into the fold. Show them that, look, these aren't terrible things. They're not the worst thing in the world. You fundamentally have to understand these things. Try going out shooting sometimes. And we need people that really can fulfill that mentorship capacity and not push people away. We have to be able to have a dialogue with individuals in order to provide context, to provide information, and to have a meaningful exchange of ideas. This is an effective way that we can go forth and try to start to turn culture more into the favor once more of arms, the individual's right to arms, and additionally, the realm of the militia, okay? It's a multifaceted, multi-front situation, but it is one area that I feel, unfortunately, we haven't done as well as we could with. And I think that there's a lot of room for improvement in a lot of ways that we can not only expand this information sphere culturally, but to improve society and further liberty as time goes on. The irony, though, is government claims the people don't need certain arms, while stockpiling these very arms for itself. So if the individual, if the society is of no threat to the government, then what is the purpose for arms? Why is it that they have to stockpile so many arms? They might say, well, it's for defense, it's for this, it's for that. But in the end of the day, if that was truly the case, if they were really concerned about defense, you would see more of the militia, you would see more well-armed individuals, and you would furthermore see an emphasis on a well-regulated, not in the contemporary sense, but in the true legal defining sense, a well-regulated populace in which people are properly trained, training is maintained, and we have access to the same arms. So we're going to move into segment 7 here. Give me 1 second. Of natural rights and the realm that natural rights really, they can't be legislated away. It's not one of those things that really meets the sniff test, if you will. Blackstone talks about this. Society cannot abolish self-defense. How do you get rid of self-defense? You're going to find a way to defend yourself one way or another. You're trying to eradicate something that everybody has the ability to do. Now, we see this in varying degrees, and we also see this in, well, they try to restrict or they try to cut down access on arms or whatever the case is. But in the end of the day, you're going to find a way to defend yourself. Jefferson also talks about arms are indispensable to free men. Okay? Free men. It is an indispensable item to free men. Okay. We have Mason here. To disarm the people is to enslave them, right? Franklin follows this up. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety. A key point of all of this is any law that strips the people of arms is not law. And we have seen this in numerous different excerpts and discussions and many other things by our founders, saying that such a law would be null and void. And as it is not law, it is a usurpation, and there is a specific difference between this, right? Natural rights stand above statutes. And this was fundamentally understood by the founders. So I want to take some time here to kind of wrap this up, bow tie it, and provide a little reflection. The right to arms is not about hunting or sport. It is about the survival of liberty, the ability of the individual to defend itself from tyranny, from both at home specifically and abroad. It is about preserving the balance of power between the people and the state, which was fundamental, and our founders knew this. It is about ensuring that no government can enslave its citizens without resistance, a righteous resistance as was defined by our founders. Some closing quotes here that I would like to go back over, kind of summarizing some of the earlier ones by Tinch Cox, is that every terrible implement of the soldier are the birthright of an American. We have the birthright to all of the implements of the soldier. Not a few, not a couple, but all of them at our disposal. So that way, we are not left defenseless and at the whim of government, correct? Patrick Henry, the great object is that every man be armed. And of course, at the time, man was talking about every human being, but we could use more of a contemporary sense here in terms of men and women, which is what they meant for the verbiage at the time. Every person should be armed. That was the great object and the great debates that they had. It was a general consensus by the founders and by those who came before us that this was highly important to preventing tyranny, but also preserving liberty. Mason, to disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them. They fundamentally understood by their own history that disarmament often came at a very drastic price, a price that once it is paid, is nigh on impossible to overcome. Therefore, a population or a society that is built in liberty, that seeks to maintain liberty, must be armed, must be well maintained, and properly trained, in the term of well regulated, as they had spoken on. So look, here's a couple things that I want to put out there. Okay. Do not allow regulation to be twisted into restriction. Okay. We need to stand firm on what well regulated means. It is not to restrict. It is not to deprive. It is not to keep you from the things that we have a birthright to, as our founders said. It is, in essence, to be properly maintained, properly trained, and properly prepared at all times. That is the essence of what well-regulated means. It is not to support or enforce restrictions, mandates, statutes, laws, or any of that. Our founders fundamentally understood that these things were not recognized as law. They were null and void. And this was the expectation they had for us as we were to go through these times, that we should not adhere to these things, that we should not simply bow down to these things, but overall to not recognize them as of any force at all. We have to take a stand at some point, and we have to stand firm on the principles of liberty and the defense of not only ourselves, but each other, our communities, our states, and ultimately our nation. And the best way to do that is to stand firm on what well-regulated means, to be trained, maintained, and prepared. Uphold the founders' vision of free, armed, and trained people as the ultimate safeguard to liberty, as I had just described. But this was their vision. This is what they wanted. This is what they saw. They wrote this into our founding documents, and there's numerous citations of their conversations about this. If it wasn't something that they had thought was important, you would have barely seen a discussion on it. I would wager that. Look, this was a fundamental part to who we are as Americans. The recognition that we have a birthright to these things, that they are our rights. They're rights that are recognized by the first law of nature, but given to us upon our birth. We have these things, not by government, not by law, not by statute, but our simple birthright. And I believe that derives from God, who therefore derives nature. So, on kind of a closing point here, as sentinels of liberty, remember, liberty endures only when people retain the means to defend it. We cannot relent. We must not give in. We must fight at every single corner in order to maintain our liberty and the ability to defend our life, our property, and our rights and ourselves, to defend our communities and to defend our states and to defend our country. Liberty will flourish more so with an armed people than a subjugated masses. Now, with all of that being said, that is the segment. So I'm going to take a few minutes here just to kind of go through some of the comments, see what you guys and gals have to say. I'd really, really appreciate if you take and share this segment here or this video to your friends, your family. Get it out there, spread it as much as you can. It really, really helps the outreach to getting into new areas and to hopefully be able to spread the message of liberty with each and every video. As always, I always appreciate everybody who takes the time to come in and watch these videos because your support means everything to me. I can't do this without you. So without further ado, I'm going to go through and just say hi to everybody. Centerline Systems, David Andert, Chuck, it's so good to see you. I saw Learn Me Something in the feed here. Let's go through here. I hope Gene is out there doing exactly this right now. Best of luck to our cousins across the pond. Absolutely. Gene the Machine, brother, I'm here for you. I'm here supporting you. And you guys, I mean, yeah, it was your people, Gene, that started this rebellion. Okay. And we from your people, we created our own crazy country. So I wish the best for your people. I wish an enduring reigniting of liberty in your hearts. And I hope that you find success in the future in putting off the shackles of tyranny that you guys experience over in the UK, and that you one day retain your freedom and live as a truly liberty-oriented and free people. That is my wish for you, as with every country in Europe and every country around the world. I hope that we one day will be able to see liberty sprout up in so many corners of the world. By, with, and through also the people. Fantastic comment. Absolutely. Yeah, that was exactly the intent of the founders. Centerline. Let's see here. David, also great to see you. Capable of anything. Historically, we have had numerous military units that used regulators in their motto. The meaning has always been understood. Yes, this is absolutely true. And I think when we look at the realm of what well-regulated means, and we look at it in the legal context of what I have described tonight, it really does provide the basis for an understanding of, look, like, this is us. Okay, this is our responsibility. Is the onus and impetus is on us, and we must train, we must be ready, we must be prepared, and we must be lethal when it requires it. So absolutely, that was fantastic. I knew what you meant, though. I just saw your comment, CLS, just below that. I knew exactly what you meant. Let's see here. So I just want to cover this real quick. The Department of War versus Department of Defense. Department of War does extend all the way back a long, long time, even in and around our founding era. And so I think the Department of War is okay. And Chris Ann Hall actually brought up a really good point. The Department of Defense is almost more of a guise and a facade in order for the government to get away with a lot of things they shouldn't. Whereas when you're the Department of War, well, it kind of explains exactly what you do, right? It explains kind of like what it surrounds. And furthermore, it puts a little bit more of an impetus on the notion that if we're going to go to war, we have got to do this in the proper constitutional context. So I'm not opposed to the Department of War. However, unfortunately, I don't think the Trump administration fundamentally understands what the Department of War traditionally meant. It's not this idea to go forth and crusade and create chaos and all of these other things. No, it had an understanding. It had a meaning. And that meaning was very, very weighty and very heavy. It was never to go gallop across the globe and, create chaos. It was to go to war only when we needed to our defense, to repel an invasion or an attack. That was what our founders understood. And as I've said numerous times before, there was a clear definition or a clear understanding of what war was to our founders. It wasn't limited to the scope of how little or how big something was. It was any act of aggression of one sovereign upon another or another people. Okay, this was very fundamental in their understanding of war, and it's something that I overwhelmingly feel that many in our military sector today, which again by their own admission shouldn't even exist, but here we are. Many of them don't care about. They don't care about the way that we're supposed to conduct ourselves. They don't care about the proper parameters or any of this. But I'm not against the Department of War. I think there was a reason for it, and the founders fundamentally understood that too. Let's go through here. Seeing a lot of haze. PNW. Mike, great to have you here. Absolutely, sir. Thank you for coming in. You kind of caught it at the tail end here. If you get a chance, go back and check it out once we're wrapped up here. I think you'll like the subject matter for this evening. A war versus defense. The use of war has been forgotten 100%. I just saw that last comment down there by Centerline. Yeah, it has, and I think that really puts us down into a really perilous trajectory, unfortunately. Mike, thank you for the sub, man. I really appreciate it. Like I said, feel free to go back after we're finished up here, take a look and leave me your thoughts. Let me know what you think after you watch the entire segment. I'd love to hear what your feedback is on that, as well as check out all the rest of the other content. So on that note, thank you everybody for tuning in. If you did miss it or you did kind of get here a little bit late, it should be up pretty soon or almost right away after I'm done. So go back, take a look. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. I always love to hear from you all, and I do the best that I possibly can to reply to everybody and make sure that everybody is heard. Neckbeard conservative throwing their fists in the air. That was actually pretty funny. I actually liked that. That was good. Damn, I missed it from the gym. Well, Gene, I'm here to tell you, man, gym is important. Stay fit. So on that note, look, everybody, thank you so much. And I'm going to send you out with a little bit of outro music here for your enjoyment. So take care. God bless. Go with liberty and be the difference that you want to see.
Steel-clad fist, rise in the dark. Shattered chains ignite the spark. Tyrants crumble, feel the flame. Settle strike and freedom's name. March of vengeance, hearts of stone. Blades of justice carve the throne. Freedom's cry, a deafening roar. Liberty's warriors waging war. March of vengeance, hearts of stone. Blades of justice carve the throne. Freedom's cry, a deafening roar. Liberty's warriors waging war. Sentinels rise, unyielding force, tearing through the tyrant's course. Shields of valor, swords of fire, crushing the weight of the empire. Fields of ruin, skies of red, echoes of the fallen dead. Through the ashes, they ascend. The fight for freedom will not end. Chains of oppression, ripped apart. Rage and courage, fill the heart. No retreat, no surrender. The flames of liberty burn forever. Sentinels rise, unyielding force, tearing through the tyrant's course. Shields of valor, swords of fire, crushing the weight of the empire. Kaiser! Sentinels rise, unyielding